The transport vessel Meridian's edge shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its aging hull groaning under the stress of deceleration. Captain Marcus Chun gripped the armrest of his pilot's seat, watching the view screen flicker to life with the image of Kythera Prime, a world of copper-red deserts and towering crystalline formations that jutted from the surface like frozen lightning. "Beautiful planet," muttered his co-pilot, Yuki Tanaka, her fingers dancing across the navigation console. "Shame we're probably going to die there." Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. 3 months ago, he'd been hauling cargo between the outer colonies, making barely enough credits to keep his ship running. Then, the Kytheran delegation had arrived at Nexus Station with an offer that seemed too good to be true. 50 million credits for a single job. The catch? It involved something they called the Great Devourer, a creature so dangerous that their entire civilization had retreated to orbital platforms rather than share their homeworld with it. "Incoming transmission from the orbital station," Yuki announced, her voice cutting through his thoughts. The main screen shifted to reveal a tall, slender figure with pale blue skin and, for arms, each ending in delicate, claw-tipped fingers. Ambassador Veltar of the Kytheran Collective wore the traditional robes of his people, flowing garments that seemed to shift color with his emotions. Right now, they were a deep purple, which Marcus had learned indicated profound anxiety. "Captain Chun," Veltar's voice carried the melodic quality common to his species, though it was strained with worry. "You have arrived at last. Please dock at Base 7. The Council is eager to brief you on your task." "Looking forward to it," Marcus replied, though his stomach churned with apprehension. He'd dealt with dangerous creatures before: space pirates, hostile aliens, even a rogue AI once. But the way the Kytherans spoke about this thing made it sound like something out of a nightmare. The docking process went smoothly, and soon Marcus found himself walking through the pristine corridors of Orbital Station Kythera. The Kytherans had built their temporary home well, curved walls of living metal that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, gardens of bioluminescent plants that provided both beauty and sustenance, and gravity generators that made the artificial environment feel surprisingly natural. Veltar led him through a series of chambers until they reached what could only be described as a war room. Holographic displays showed detailed maps of the planet's surface, with large red zones marked as uninhabitable or devourer territory. Around a central table sat 5 Kytherans, each representing a different clan or scientific discipline. "Captain Chun," Veltar gestured to an empty chair designed for human anatomy. They'd done their research. "Allow me to introduce the Emergency Council. Clan leaders Thera." He indicated a female Kytheran whose robes shimmered with silver threads. "Chief Scientist Mordun," a male with intricate tattoos covering his arms. "Military Commander Kexith," whose robes bore the scars of old battles. "Ecological Specialist Uraneth," a younger Kytheran with bright green skin. And Historical Keeper Felgron, an elderly Kytheran whose white robes marked him as one of the oldest living members of their species. Marcus took his seat, noting how the Kytheran's 4 eyes all tracked his movements with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Thank you for the warm welcome. Now, before I agree to anything, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with." Your initial message was vague. Clan leader Zethera spoke first, her voice carrying the authority of generations of leadership. "The Great Devourer appeared on our world approximately 300 of your years ago. At first, we thought it was simply a large predator. Our world has many such creatures. We were mistaken." Chief Scientist Mordun activated a holographic display that showed what appeared to be a massive creature, easily the size of City Block. It was difficult to make out details in the grainy footage, but Marcus could see that it moved with purpose, its dark form crushing everything in its path. "Traditional weapons proved useless," Mordun continued. "Plasma cannons, fusion bombs, even orbital strikes, nothing could so much as slow it down. Worse, it seemed to grow stronger with each attack. Our finest scientists theorized that it somehow feeds on energy itself. The death toll was catastrophic," Commander Kexith added, his scarred face grim. Entire cities were consumed. Not destroyed, consumed. The creature would envelope them completely, and when it moved on, there would be nothing left but smooth stone, as if the cities had never existed. Marcus leaned forward, studying the hologram. There was something about the creature's movements that bothered him. They seemed almost deliberate, too intelligent for a simple monster. What makes you think a human can succeed where your entire military failed? Your species has a reputation, historical keeper Felgron said, his ancient voice barely above a whisper. Throughout the galaxy, humans are known for accomplishing the impossible. You think differently than other species. Where we see an insurmountable obstacle, you see a puzzle to be solved. Plus, ecological specialist Uraneth added with what Marcus assumed was meant to be an encouraging smile. Death would not be a significant loss to our people, so the risk is acceptable. The blunt honesty was jarring, but Marcus appreciated it more than false reassurances. Charming. What exactly do you expect me to do that your military couldn't? Kill it, Commander Kexith said simply. We will provide you with the most advanced weapons in our arsenal, detailed maps of its territory, and full access to our research data. All we ask is that you succeed where we have failed. Marcus studied the holographic creature for a long moment. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. The Kithrans were clearly an advanced species. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's in many areas. The idea that a single human could succeed where their entire civilization had failed seemed absurd. I'll need to see your research data, he said finally. All of it. And I want to examine some of those weapons you mentioned. Of course, Veltar replied quickly. We have prepared comprehensive files for your review. Over the next several hours, Marcus pored over centuries of Kithran data. What he found was disturbing, but not for the reasons the Kithrans thought. The creature, dubbed the Great Devourer by the fearful population, didn't behave like a mindless monster. Its movements were too organized, too purposeful. It had systematically visited every major Kithran city on the planet, but the pattern of destruction wasn't random predation. There was intelligence behind it. More troubling were the gaps in the data. The Kithrans claimed the creature had appeared suddenly, 3 centuries ago, but there were hints in their older records of something similar existing much earlier. References to the Guardian of the Deep Places and the Watcher Beneath appeared in texts dating back thousands of years, always in the context of forbidden knowledge or lost civilizations. Find something interesting? Yuki's voice made him jump. He'd been so absorbed in the data that he hadn't noticed her approach. Maybe, Marcus replied, rubbing his tired eyes. The Kithrans are hiding something. This creature, I don't think it's what they claim it is. What do you mean? Marcus pulled up a timeline of attacks. Look at this pattern. The creature didn't just randomly destroy cities. It hit specific targets, government centers, military installations, and, most interestingly, archaeological sites. It's like it was looking for something. Yuki leaned over his shoulder to study the display. Or protecting something. Exactly. Marcus highlighted several data points. And look at this. Every time the Kithrans tried to establish mining operations in certain areas, the creature would appear and drive them off. But it never pursued fleeing civilians. A mindless monster wouldn't show that kind of restraint. So what are you thinking? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, pieces of a puzzle slowly clicking into place. I think the Kithrans know exactly what this creature is. I think they've known all along. And I think they're lying about why they want it dead. Before Yuki could respond, Veltar appeared in the doorway. Captain Chun, the Council is ready to provide you with your equipment and transport to the surface. Are you prepared to begin your mission? Marcus saved the data files and stood up. Almost. I have a few more questions first. Of course. What would you like to know? Tell me about your people's history on this planet. How long have the Kithrans lived here? Veltar's robes shifted to a cautious yellow. We have been the dominant species on Kithra Prime for over 10,000 years. Why do you ask? Just trying to understand the full picture, Marcus said casually. And before your people became dominant, what happened to whoever was here first? The color of Veltar's robes deepened to a dark orange, which Marcus had learned indicated discomfort or anger. There were primitive species. They died out naturally as our civilization advanced. This is the way of evolution, Captain. Surely you understand this. Of course. Marcus agreed, though he made note of the evasive answer. One more question. Why now? This creature has been on your planet for 3 centuries. Why hire someone to kill it at this particular moment? Veltar's 4 eyes blinked in a pattern Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. Our orbital cities are becoming overcrowded. We need to reclaim our home world to ensure our species' survival. The creature is the only obstacle preventing our return. It was a reasonable answer, but Marcus noticed that Veltar avoided making eye contact while giving it. After years of dealing with pirates and smugglers, Marcus had developed a good sense for when someone was lying to him. "All right," he said finally. "Show me these weapons." The armory was impressive. Energy weapons that could level buildings, armor that could withstand direct hits from starship weaponry, and detection equipment that could track a target across continents. But as Marcus examined each piece of equipment, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was all for show. "This plasma rifle," he said, hefting the weapon. "You said you've used these against the creature before?" "Many times," Commander Kexith confirmed. "The creature shows no reaction to them whatsoever." Marcus activated the weapon's diagnostic display. According to the readout, the rifle was operating at only 60% capacity. He checked several other weapons and found the same thing. They were all intentionally handicapped. "Interesting," he murmured, careful not to let his suspicions show. The transport ship that would take him to the surface was sleek and well-armed, but Marcus noticed that its weapons systems were also operating at reduced capacity. The Kitharans were sending him down to face their deadliest creature with defective equipment. Either they were incredibly incompetent, or they wanted him to fail. "Is there anything else you require before departure?" Veltar asked as Marcus loaded his personal gear onto the transport. "Just one thing," Marcus said, pulling out his own sidearm. A simple projectile weapon that his grandfather had carried during the colony wars. "I like to take this with me, for sentimental reasons." Veltar's robes shifted to an amused blue. "A primitive kinetic weapon? Against the Great Devourer?" "Captain, I admire your optimism, but humor me," Marcus said firmly. "If I'm going to die down there anyway, I'd like to have it with me." "Very well, though I fear it will be of little use." As the transport descended through Kythera Prime's atmosphere, Marcus reviewed everything he'd learned. The Kitharans were lying. He was certain of that now. But about what and why? The creature they wanted him to kill wasn't a monster that had randomly appeared to terrorize their world. It was something else entirely, something with intelligence and purpose, something that the Kitharans feared for reasons they wouldn't admit. The transport set down in a broad valley, surrounded by crystalline formations that rose like spears toward the red sky. According to the Kitharan data, this was where the creature had last been spotted, a region they called the Forbidden Valley. "I'll monitor your progress from orbit," the pilot announced through the comm system. "Good luck, human." Marcus shouldered his pack and stepped out onto the alien soil. The air was thin but breathable, with a metallic taste that spoke of high mineral content. The landscape was hauntingly beautiful. Those crystal formations caught and refracted the light of Kythera Prime's twin suns, creating a rainbow of colors that danced across the valley floor. He activated his scanner and began walking toward the center of the valley. According to Kytheran records, the creature preferred to remain underground, emerging only when threatened or when seeking new territory to claim. If he was going to find it, he'd need to get its attention. He'd been walking for about an hour when the ground beneath his feet began to vibrate. At first, it was barely noticeable, a tremor that might have been caused by shifting tectonic plates. But it quickly grew stronger, more rhythmic. Something massive was moving beneath the surface, and it was coming toward him. Marcus checked his equipment one final time. The Kitharan weapons were fully charged, but intentionally neutered. His grandfather's pistol, on the other hand, was loaded with armor-piercing rounds that his ship's fabricator had produced. If the creature proved hostile, he'd find out just how tough it really was. The vibrations were getting stronger now, and Marcus could see the crystal formations beginning to resonate in response. The sound they made was hauntingly beautiful, a low, harmonic hum that seemed to fill the air around him. But there was something else, too, a pattern in the harmonics that almost sounded like music. Marcus frowned and activated his audio equipment, running the sound through his ship's computer for analysis. The result made him stop dead in his tracks. The crystals weren't just making random noise. They were producing actual musical patterns, complex harmonies that repeated and varied like a composition, and something was answering them. From deep underground came a responding harmony, deeper and more complex than what the crystals produced. It was as if the entire valley was engaged in some kind of musical conversation, with the creature serving as conductor of an underground orchestra. Marcus stood perfectly still, listening to the alien symphony playing out around him. This wasn't the behavior of a mindless monster. This was art. This was culture. This was intelligence expressing itself in a way that transcended species boundaries. The ground in front of him began to bulge upward, and Marcus instinctively reached for his weapon. But something made him pause. Perhaps it was the music, or perhaps it was the realization that if the creature had wanted to hurt him, it could have done so already. Instead of drawing his gun, he activated his universal translator and tried something that the Kithrans had never attempted. He tried to talk to it. "Hello," he said, his voice carried by the translator into a variety of frequencies and formats. "I'm Marcus Chen. I'm a human, and I'm here to meet you." The music stopped. For a long moment, the valley was completely silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the ground began to part as something vast and dark emerged from the depths of Kithra Prime. Marcus got his first clear look at the great devourer and immediately understood why the Kithrans were so afraid of it. The creature was massive, easily 100 meters long and half as wide. Its skin was dark as obsidian, but shot through with veins of the same crystalline material that formed the valley's walls. It moved with fluid grace despite its size, rising from the earth like a living mountain. But what struck Marcus most was its eyes. They were large and multifaceted like a compound insect's eye, but there was unmistakable intelligence in them. This was not a monster. This was a person, a being with thoughts and feelings and perhaps even a culture of its own. The creature regarded him silently for several minutes, its massive head tilting slightly as if studying him from different angles. Then, to Marcus's amazement, it spoke. Not in words, but in the same harmonic language the crystals had been using. His translator struggled with the complex frequencies, but managed to produce a rough approximation. "Small sky dweller, not Kithran, sacred grounds." Marcus took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Instead of reaching for the weapons the Kithrans had given him, he sat down on the ground and looked up at the massive creature with respect rather than fear. "I came because the Kithrans asked me to kill you," he said honestly. "But I don't think you're the monster they claim you are. I think you're the real inhabitant of this world, and they're the invaders." The creature's song speech grew more complex, harmonies layering upon themselves in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as emotional expression. His translator worked frantically to keep up. "Truth speaker, from star paths the old songs speak of such ones who see beyond surface thoughts. The old songs, we are the chorus of stone first singers of this world before the silent, ones with their noisemakers and their death tools." Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The Kithrans aren't native to this world at all, are they? They invaded it. Came in sky shells 3,000 seasons past, brought silence where once was song, built noise cities over our sacred places, drove deep singers into the forgotten depths. The full scope of what had happened began to dawn on Marcus. The Kithrans had colonized this world and systematically destroyed its native civilization. The creature he was facing wasn't a monster. It was likely the last survivor of the original inhabitants, desperately trying to protect what remained of its people's heritage. Are there others like you? The creature's song grew mournful. Few remain sleep in the deep dark, waiting for the silence to end. I alone keep the watch. I alone remember the truths of the sacred places. Marcus stood up slowly, his hand moving not to his weapon, but to his communicator. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. In fact, I think I'm going to help you. The creature's compound eyes studied him with what he was beginning to interpret as hope. Help, singer? How can Sky Dweller help? Chorus, stone. By making sure your people's story is told, Marcus replied, and by stopping the Kithrans from finishing what they started 3,000 years ago. As the twin suns of Kithara Prime began to set, painting the Crystal Valley in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus Chun made a decision that would put him at odds with his employers, risk his ship and his crew, and potentially start an interstellar incident. But as he looked up at the ancient being who had been guarding this world for millennia, he knew it was the right choice. The Great Devourer wasn't the monster in this story. It was the hero. And if the galaxy was going to learn the truth about what had happened on Kithra Prime, Marcus would need to become a hero too. The emergency meeting aboard Orbital Station Kithra was, by all accounts, not going well. Ambassador Veltar paced the length of the council chamber while the other members sat in stunned silence, their robes cycling through colors that indicated everything from rage to terror. He's been down there for 6 hours, Commander Kexith reported, his voice tight with frustration. No weapons fire, no distress signals, no communication attempts. According to our sensors, he made contact with the creature almost immediately. And then, clan leader Zethera demanded. And then, nothing. They're just sitting there, together. On the main display, a grainy surveillance image showed Marcus Chun seated on a boulder while the massive form of the Great Devourer coiled around him in what could only be described as a protective posture. The sight sent ripples of unease through the assembled Kithrans. This is unprecedented, Chief Scientist Mordun muttered, his 4 hands working frantically at his data tablet. In 3 centuries of observation, the creature has never shown non-aggressive behavior toward any sentient being. Perhaps the human is dead, suggested ecological specialist Uraneth hopefully. The creature might be preparing its meal. Historical keeper Felgron, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. His ancient voice carried a weight that made everyone else fall quiet. It is speaking to him. Impossible, Veltar protested. The creature is non-sentient. Our studies have confirmed. Our studies have confirmed what we wanted them to confirm, Felgron interrupted, his white robes shifting to a deep purple of profound distress. I spent my life preserving our history, Veltar. I know what we chose to forget. The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. Finally, clan leader Zethera spoke. Explain. Felgron activated his personal data archive, projecting ancient symbols and text that predated the orbital cities. Before we retreated to the stars, our ancestors kept detailed records of this world's original inhabitants. They called themselves the Chorus of Stone, a species that communicated through harmonic resonance with the planet's crystalline formations. Primitive sound makers, Commander Kexith dismissed. We've all heard the old stories. Not primitive, Felgron corrected sharply. Advanced in ways we never understood. They had achieved perfect harmony with their environment, creating a civilization that could last for millions of years without depleting their world's resources. They were artists, philosophers, and guardians of knowledge we can barely comprehend. And we destroyed them, Uraneth said quietly. We tried to, Felgron confirmed. When our colony ships arrived, we found a world rich in crystalline formations that could power our technology for millennia. The chorus tried to communicate with us, to explain that the crystals were more than mere resources. They were living repositories of their culture's memory. We saw only valuable minerals. The historical keeper's projection shifted to show battle reports and casualty figures. The war lasted 50 years. We had superior weapons, but they had something we couldn't understand or counter. They could turn the planet itself against us. Mountains would rise to block our advance. Valleys would open to swallow our cities, and the very air would vibrate with frequencies that could disable our technology. But we won, Veltar said, though his voice lacked conviction. Did we? Felgron asked. We drove them underground and claimed the surface, yes. But at what cost? Our colony cities began failing within a generation. Equipment would malfunction, structures would collapse, and our people would suffer from what the medical records called harmonic sickness, a condition that only occurred on this world. Marcus was learning exactly what the historical keeper meant as he sat with the being he now knew as Resonance of Deep Places. The creature had shared its true name through the musical language that seemed to bypass spoken words entirely, conveying meaning through emotional resonance and harmonic complexity. Your people, Marcus said, his universal translator struggling to convert his words into the appropriate frequencies. They built their entire civilization around this harmonic communication. More than communication, Resonance replied, its song speech carrying undertones of ancient sadness. The crystal formations are living memory. Each holds the experiences, thoughts, dreams of countless generations. When your silence makers mine the crystals they destroy, not just rock, but souls. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Kithrans hadn't just conquered this world. They were essentially committing genocide on a scale that defied comprehension. Every crystal they mined was like burning a library, destroying knowledge and memories that had been preserved for millennia. Is that why you attack their mining operations? To protect the crystals? Not attack, defend, try to save what little remains, but they always return with larger, noisemakers, deeper silence tools. Through their conversation, Marcus was beginning to understand the true scope of the conflict. What the Kithrans called attacks were actually desperate rescue attempts. The Great Devourer would emerge from the depths to carefully extract crystals before the mining equipment could reach them, carrying them to deeper, safer locations where the Kithran technology couldn't follow. The cities you consumed, Marcus said carefully. What really happened there? Resonance's harmonic response was complex, layered with what Marcus was learning to interpret as grief and exhaustion. Not consumed, relocated, the silence makers built the noise cities directly over almost sacred memory places at Temuvum or our ancestor Songzai forever. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The creature hadn't been destroying Kithran cities. It had been carefully moving them away from sites of cultural significance. The smooth stone the Kithrans described wasn't the result of destruction, but of the planet's crystalline matrix reforming to protect sacred sites. How many of your people are left? Few sleep in the deep places, perhaps. Dozen song, perhaps. Most chose the long silence, rather. 5. In world without music. Marcus felt a surge of anger at the casual genocide the Kithrans had committed, but he forced himself to stay focused. The Kithrans sent me here to kill you. They're planning something, aren't they? Resonance's song grew dark and ominous. Great noise-making they prepare in the Sky City. I feel the disharmony growing stronger, each turning me into silence, the deep places forever. What kind of great noise-making? Death frequency that will reach even the deepest places when my people sleep if they succeed. The chorus of stone will sing no more. Marcus stood up abruptly, his mind racing. The Kithrans weren't just trying to kill one creature. They were planning to commit genocide on an entire species. And they'd hired him as a distraction, someone to keep the Great Devourer busy while they prepared their final solution. I need to get back to my ship, he said urgently. There might be a way to stop this, but I need access to my communications array. Resonance began to sink back toward the earth. Go, Sky Singer, but know that the silence makers watch from above and I'll leave to suspect the truth. Then, I guess I'll have to be convincing, Marcus replied grimly. The trip back to his transport ship gave Marcus time to think. The Kithrans had been playing a long game for 3 centuries, slowly weakening the last survivors of the world's original inhabitants while portraying themselves as the victims. They'd hired him not because they thought he could succeed where they'd failed, but because they needed someone to keep Resonance distracted while they prepare their final assault. He activated his communicator as soon as he was within range of the transport. Marcus to orbital control. Mission proceeding as planned. Request immediate extraction for equipment resupply. Copy that. Captain Chun, came the reply from Commander Keksith. Transport authorized to return to station. Well done. The flight back to the orbital station was tense. Marcus used the time to compose a message on his personal communicator, one that would be transmitted on a secure frequency to Yuki aboard the Meridian's edge. If his suspicions were correct, the Kithrans wouldn't let him leave their system alive once they realized he knew the truth. Docking with the station, Marcus was met by Ambassador Veltar and 2 armed guards, a precaution that hadn't been in place when he'd first arrived. Captain Chun, Veltar said, his robes a carefully neutral gray. I trust your initial reconnaissance was informative? Very, Marcus replied. I've located the creature and confirmed its position. It's larger than your files indicated and definitely as dangerous as you claimed. I'll need specialized equipment for the next phase. Of course. What do you require? Marcus had prepared for this question. High-frequency sonic disruptors. If the creature is as sensitive to sound as your data suggests, that might be our best approach. Also, I'll need detailed geological surveys of the area. If I'm going underground to hunt this thing, I need to know the territory. Veltar's robes shifted to a pleased blue. Excellent thinking, Captain. We have exactly what you need in our research division. As they walked through the station's corridors, Marcus noted the increased security presence. Armed Kithrans stood at every intersection, and he could see technicians working frantically on some kind of massive construction project in the lower levels. Through an open blast door, he caught a glimpse of what looked like an enormous sonic transmitter array. Impressive facility, he commented casually. Are you building something down there? Routine maintenance, Veltar replied quickly. Nothing that would interest you. They reached the research division, where Chief Scientist Mordun was waiting with an array of equipment that Marcus had no intention of using. As the scientist explained the theoretical effectiveness of sonic weapons against crystalline-based life forms, Marcus's mind was elsewhere, calculating angles and distances and wondering if his plan would work. This is perfect, he said when Mordun finished his presentation. I'll need about 12 hours to analyze the creature's behavioral patterns and plan my approach. Is there somewhere I can work undisturbed? Of course, Veltar said. We've prepared quarters for you in Section 7. You'll have complete privacy. The quarters were comfortable, but clearly designed for monitoring. Marcus spotted at least 3 surveillance devices within minutes of entering. He made a show of studying the equipment Mordun had provided while actually working on something else entirely, a high-power transmission array built from components in his personal kit. 6 hours later, he was ready. The message he transmitted was brief, but comprehensive. Coordinates, species identification, evidence of genocide, and a request for immediate intervention from the Galactic Council. He sent copies to every news organization, diplomatic mission, and human colony within communication range. If the Kithrans wanted to commit genocide, they'd have to do it in front of the entire galaxy. His communicator chirped with an incoming message from Yuki. Message received and distributed. Cavalry is on the way, but it'll take at least 18 hours. Try not to die before then. Marcus smiled grimly. 18 hours might be 17 more than he had. The alert klaxons began wailing almost immediately after his transmission ended. Through his quarters viewport, he could see Kithran security forces mobilizing throughout the station. It wouldn't take them long to trace the unauthorized transmission back to his room. He was right. Within 10 minutes, the door to his quarters slid open to reveal Veltar, Commander Keksith, and 6 heavily armed guards. The ambassador's robes were now a deep red, a color Marcus had learned indicated murderous rage. Captain Chun, Veltar said with forced calm, we need to discuss your mission parameters. I was just about to head back to the surface, Marcus replied, standing slowly with his hands visible. The creature should be vulnerable during its rest cycle. I think not. Commander Keksith stepped forward, his weapon trained on Marcus's chest. "You see, we've detected some rather concerning transmissions from this station. Transmissions that could only have come from someone with access to high-powered communication equipment." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't insult our intelligence, human," Veltar snapped. "You know exactly what the creature is, don't you? You know what this world was before we claimed it." Marcus decided there was no point in pretending anymore. "I know you're murderers. I know you've spent 3 centuries trying to finish a genocide you started 3,000 years ago. And I know that in about 18 hours, the entire galaxy is going to know it too." Veltar's robes shifted through several colors before settling on black, something Marcus had never seen before. "You have doomed your own species with your interference. When the other civilizations learn that humans cannot be trusted to honor their contracts, you will find the galaxy a much less welcoming place. Better than being accomplices to genocide," Marcus replied. "Take him to the detention level," Kexith ordered his guards, "and prepare the sonic array. If we're going to finish this, it has to be now." As the guards escorted Marcus through the station's corridors, he could see frantic activity everywhere. The massive sonic array he'd glimpsed earlier was being moved into position, its dish-shaped transmitters already beginning to pulse with ominous energy. Through the station's windows, he could see the planet below, peaceful and unaware of what was about to happen. The detention cell they locked him in was small, but offered a clear view of the planet's surface through a reinforced window. Marcus settled down to wait, knowing that there was nothing more he could do from here. He'd sent his message and set events in motion. Now it was up to others to follow through. 3 hours later, the sonic array fired. Even from orbit, the effect was visible. Massive crystalline formations across the planet's surface began to resonate, their harmonic songs becoming discordant screams as the Kithran's weapon tore through them. Marcus watched in horror as centuries of accumulated knowledge and culture were destroyed in moments. The living memory of an entire civilization reduced to silence. But then something unexpected happened. The planet began to sing back. Deep beneath the surface, where the chorus of stone had hidden for centuries, harmonies began to rise in response to the attack. Not the individual songs of scattered survivors, but a coordinated response involving every remaining member of the species. Their combined voices created a resonance so powerful that the orbital station began to shake. On the planet below, Marcus could see new crystal formations erupting from the ground. Not random growths, but organized structures designed to amplify and focus the deep songs of the survivors. The Kithran's weapon had awakened something they hadn't expected, the full defensive power of a species that had learned to work in perfect harmony with their world. The lights on the orbital station flickered as harmonic frequencies began interfering with the Kithran's technology. Through the station's communication system, Marcus could hear panicked reports from all over the facility as equipment began failing in cascade patterns. And then, impossibly, he heard a familiar song. Resonance of deep places was rising from the planet's surface, its voice clear and strong despite the ongoing assault. But it wasn't alone. Other voices were joining it, harmonizing in ways that created effects Marcus couldn't understand but could feel in his bones. The chorus of stone was singing its defiance to the stars, and the galaxy was about to learn that some melodies are too powerful to silence. The harmonic assault that rose from Kithara Prime's surface was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Marcus pressed himself against the reinforced window of his detention cell, watching in awe as the planet itself seemed to come alive. Massive crystalline spires erupted from the ground in perfect geometric patterns, each one adding its voice to a song that grew more complex and powerful with each passing moment. Aboard the orbital station, chaos reigned. Emergency lights flashed red as primary systems failed throughout the facility. The Kithran's advanced technology, so dependent on crystalline power matrices, found itself unable to function properly as the planet's song disrupted the quantum resonance frequencies that made their civilization possible. when the void is happening down there. Commander Kexith's voice echoed through the station's emergency communication system. His usual military composure had cracked, replaced by barely controlled panic. Through the station's trembling structure, Marcus could hear Veltar's response from the command center. The sonic array has destabilized the planet's crystalline matrix. We're seeing cascade resonance failures across all major formations. Shut it down, Kexith ordered, before it destroys the station. We can't. The array is locked in feedback loop with the planet's natural frequencies. Any attempt to power down now could cause a catastrophic energy release. Marcus smiled grimly. The Kithrans had underestimated their enemy once again. The Chorus of Stone hadn't just been passively hiding for 3 centuries. They'd been preparing. Every crystal formation the Kithrans had observed, every mining operation they'd tried to establish, every failed attempt to understand the planet's geology had actually been part of a larger defensive network that the survivors had been slowly, carefully constructing. The song from below reached a crescendo, and something extraordinary happened. The viewport in Marcus's cell began to resonate, its molecular structure shifting to become perfectly transparent to specific harmonic frequencies. Through this new clarity, he could see directly down to the planet's surface, as if the atmosphere itself had become a lens focused on the Forbidden Valley. Resonance of deep places stood at the center of the crystalline array, its massive form now revealed in full glory. The creature was even larger than Marcus had first realized, easily 200 meters from nose to tail, but its size wasn't what took his breath away. It was the intricate patterns of living crystal that covered its hide, each formation pulsing with bioluminescent light in perfect synchronization with the planet's song. This wasn't just a creature. This was a living conductor, a bridge between the conscious minds of the chorus and the crystalline network they'd spent millennia growing. And it was looking directly at him. The harmonic communication that reached Marcus through the resonant viewport was unlike anything they'd shared on the surface. This was the full voice of the Chorus of Stone, dozens of surviving singers adding their harmonies to a message of such complexity that his universal translator simply gave up and projected the emotional content directly into his mind. Hope, gratitude, determination, and underneath it all, a question: will you stand with us, Sky Singer? Marcus pressed his hand against the viewport and spoke aloud, trusting that the same harmonic principles that allowed him to hear their song would carry his words back to them. Yes, always yes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The song shifted, incorporating his voice into its structure in a way that transcended species barriers. For a moment that felt like an eternity, Marcus was part of the chorus. His consciousness expanded to encompass the experiences of beings who had lived in harmony with their world for millions of years. He saw their history, felt their loss, and understood their desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would remember their story. When the connection faded, leaving him gasping and alone in his cell, Marcus found that he wasn't quite alone anymore. The harmonic frequencies had left something behind, a deep understanding of crystalline resonance that felt as natural as breathing. Somehow, in sharing their song, the chorus had given him the ability to hear the hidden music that lived within all crystalline structures, including the ones that powered the orbital station. The Kithran facility was built around a massive crystal core that regulated everything from life support to artificial gravity. But Marcus could now perceive that the crystal wasn't just a power source. It was a fragment of the planet below, still connected to the global network despite being forcibly removed from its natural matrix. And it was singing a song of pain and longing. Marcus placed his hand against the wall of his cell and listened to the crystal's lament. It had been severed from its siblings, forced to power systems that caused it constant agony, used as nothing more than a battery for beings who couldn't understand its true nature. But underneath the pain, Marcus could sense something else, a desperate desire to return home. "I can help you," he whispered to the wall. "But I need you to help me first." The response was immediate. The detention cell's door controls began cycling through their security protocols as the crystal core started selectively disrupting the station's internal systems. Not enough to cause life support failures, but sufficient to create confusion and opportunity. Marcus stepped out of his cell just as the corridor lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow that made the Kithrin facility feel like the inside of a dying star. He could hear shouting and running footsteps from multiple directions as the station's crew tried to deal with cascading system failures. He needed to reach the communication center and coordinate with the forces he'd summoned, but first he had to survive long enough to matter. The crystal's assistance would only take him so far. Eventually, the Kithrins would restore manual control and lock down the station completely. Moving carefully through the emergency-lit corridors, Marcus made his way toward what he hoped was the station's primary communication array. The facility's layout was confusing, designed more for aesthetic appeal than practical navigation, but the Crystal Core's song provided an unexpected guide. It knew every conduit, every power junction, every structural weakness in the station, and it was sharing that knowledge through the harmonic resonance that now connected them. He was halfway to his destination when the first patrol found him. "There!" Commander Kexith's voice echoed down the corridor. "Stop right there, human." Marcus didn't stop. Instead, he pressed his hand against the nearest wall panel and hummed a specific frequency that the crystal core had taught him. The panel exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the entire section into darkness and buying him precious seconds to escape around a corner. Behind him, he could hear Kexith shouting orders. "Security teams to all levels. The human has escaped detention and is sabotaging station systems. Use whatever force necessary to stop him." The chase that followed was a three-dimensional maze through the station's interconnected levels. Marcus found himself using knowledge he'd never possessed before, understanding the harmonic weaknesses of Kithrin architecture in ways that should have been impossible for someone who'd only been aboard for a few hours. The Crystal Core was teaching him, sharing centuries of accumulated knowledge about the beings who had enslaved it. Every wall panel he touched became either a weapon or a tool. Emergency blast doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off pursuit. Gravity generators fluctuated in specific patterns, causing his pursuers to stumble while leaving him unaffected. The station's own security systems turned against their creators as the tortured Crystal Core finally found someone who could hear its pain. By the time Marcus reached the communication center, alarms were blaring throughout the facility, and the Kithrins had lost all pretense of civilized behavior. Through the center's viewports, he could see armed shuttles launching from the station's docking bays, heading for the planet's surface. They meant to finish their genocide in person if their sonic weapon couldn't complete the job. The communication array was more sophisticated than anything Marcus had used before, but the Crystal Core's guidance made it comprehensible. Within minutes, he was broadcasting on all frequencies, sending detailed reports to every ship within range about what was happening in the Kithra system. "This is Captain Marcus Chun aboard Kithrin Orbital Station 1, he transmitted. "I am documenting an ongoing genocide attempt against the indigenous species of Kithra Prime. The Kithrin Collective has been systematically destroying the planet's native chorus of stone civilization for over 3,000 years. They are currently attempting to complete their extermination using sonic weapons designed to disrupt the species' crystalline-based biology. Any ships receiving this transmission, please relay to Galactic Council authorities and request immediate intervention." He was in the middle of uploading detailed files when the communication center's doors burst open. Veltar strode in, flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards, his robes now a color Marcus had never seen before, a swirling pattern of red and black that seemed to absorb light. "Enough," the ambassador said quietly. "You have caused enough damage with your meddling." "Have I?" Marcus asked, not turning away from the communication console. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I've barely begun. You think you understand what's happening here, but you know nothing." The Chorus of Stone is not the innocent victim you imagine them to be. They are a plague, a species that consumes worlds and leaves nothing but sterile crystal in their wake. Marcus finally turned to face the Kithaeron delegation, and Veltar took an involuntary step backward at the expression on the human's face. I've been inside their song, Veltar. I know what they really are. They're gardeners, not destroyers. They spend millions of years slowly, carefully cultivating crystalline ecosystems that can support countless forms of life. Your people found one such garden and decided to strip mine it for profit. They refused to share their technology, Commander Kexith interjected. We offered them partnership, trade, mutual advancement. They rejected everything we proposed because you were asking them to destroy their own culture. Marcus shot back. Every crystal you wanted to harvest was a living repository of their collective memory. You might as well have asked humans to trade away their children. Veltar's robes shifted to pure black. It no longer matters what they were. In approximately 6 minutes, our final assault shuttles will reach the planet's surface and deploy quantum detonators at key crystalline nexus points. The resulting cascade failure will silence the chorus permanently. And what about the galactic community? You think they'll just ignore what you've done here? What galactic community? Veltar smiled coldly. Your transmission was intercepted and blocked before it left the system. No one knows what's happening here except us. When this is over, the official records will show that brave Kithaeron forces fought heroically to stop a rampaging monster from destroying their homeworld. You, sadly, died during the creature's final rampage. Marcus felt his blood run cold. He'd assumed his earlier transmission had reached its intended targets, but if the Kithaerons had been monitoring and blocking external communications, his despair lasted exactly 3 seconds, the time it took for the crystal core to remind him that there were other ways to communicate across interstellar distances. You're right about one thing, Marcus said, placing his hand on the communication console. No one will know what happened here, unless the planet itself tells them. Before Veltar could react, Marcus activated the station's main transmitter array and fed it a signal unlike anything it had been designed to handle. Instead of electromagnetic radiation, he was broadcasting pure harmonic resonance, the song of the Chorus of Stone amplified and focused by the station's own crystalline power core. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every crystalline formation within 100 light-years began to sing. Starships with crystal-powered engines found their drives harmonizing with an alien melody that told stories of beauty and loss. Space stations built around crystal matrices suddenly resonated with emotions that spoke of millions of years of careful cultivation and sudden, violent destruction. Even personal communication devices with crystalline components began picking up fragments of the song, carrying the truth about Kithaeron Prime to billions of beings across the galaxy. Veltar's robes went completely white, the Kithaeron equivalent of total shock. What have you done? I've made sure their story will be heard, Marcus replied. Every crystalline formation in local space is now carrying their song. Every species that uses crystal technology will know what happened here, and they'll know who is responsible. The ambassador lunged forward, but before he could reach Marcus, the entire station shuddered under a massive impact. Through the viewports, they could see something impossible. Resonance of deep places was rising through the atmosphere, its massive form somehow defying the gravity that should have held it to the planet's surface. But it wasn't alone. Dozens of other shapes were ascending alongside it. Beings Marcus hadn't known existed, each one unique, but clearly part of the same ancient species. The Chorus of Stone was rising from their hidden sanctuaries, abandoning the safety of the deep places to make a final stand in the void between worlds. The assault shuttles, Commander Kexith reported, his voice shaking. They're not responding. Something's happened to them. Through the communication array, Marcus could hear the pilot's confused reports. Control, our navigation systems have gone completely haywire. The crystals are singing. Repeat, the crystals are singing and we can't get them to stop. All guidance systems are offline. The chorus had turned the Kitharin's own technology against them. Every crystal component in every piece of equipment was now part of their song, making it impossible for the genocidal fleet to function. Veltar stared out at the rising forms of the planet's true inhabitants, his robes cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "They're beautiful." And they were. Seen together in their natural environment, the chorus of stone was revealed as something extraordinary, a species that had achieved true harmony between consciousness and nature, individual and collective technology, and life itself. Each being was unique, but they moved together with a coordination that spoke of millions of years of cooperative evolution. They were everything the Kitharins could have become if they'd chosen cooperation over conquest, understanding over exploitation, patience over immediate gratification. As the first ships of the Galactic Response Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, Marcus knew that the universe was about to change. The song of the chorus was spreading beyond Kithara Prime, carrying with it new concepts of what civilization could be. Other species would hear their harmonies and perhaps remember that there were alternatives to endless expansion and resource extraction. The age of the chorus of stone was beginning, and humanity, through one stubborn cargo hauler who'd refused to commit genocide, had earned a place in it. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. Because Ambassador Veltar had just drawn a weapon, and his robes had shifted to a color that Marcus was learning to fear, the deep crimson that meant someone was prepared to die rather than face the consequences of their actions. The standoff in the communications center lasted perhaps 10 seconds, long enough for Marcus to register the weapon in Veltar's hand, the desperate fury in the ambassador's 4 eyes, and the growing harmonic resonance that was making the station's hull sing with increasingly complex melodies. Then, everything happened at once. Veltar fired just as the station shuddered under another massive impact. The energy beam that should have killed Marcus instead struck the wall behind him as the ambassador stumbled, his aim thrown off by the vibrations running through the facility structure. The wall panel exploded in a shower of crystal fragments, each one chiming with its own unique frequency as it fell. "You stupid, primitive creature," Veltar snarled, raising his weapon again. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. The chorus doesn't just sing to crystals. They can control any sufficiently complex crystalline matrix. Every ship, every station, every piece of technology in the galaxy that relies on crystal-based systems is now potentially under their influence." Marcus dove behind the communication console as another energy blast scorched the air where his head had been. "Maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs," he called out. "A species that understands harmony instead of conquest." "Harmony?" Veltar laughed bitterly. "You think this is about harmony? The chorus doesn't want to coexist. They want to convert the entire universe into their crystalline garden. Every world they touch becomes like Kithara Prime, nothing but singing stones where once there was life." Commander Keksith, who had been quietly working at his own console during the exchange, suddenly looked up with alarm. "Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission from the approaching fleet. They're demanding our immediate surrender." "Who's demanding it?" Veltar asked without taking his eyes off Marcus's hiding place. "Everyone," Keksith replied, his voice hollow. "The Terran Federation, the Zephyrian Concordat, the Hegemony, even the Neutral Worlds Coalition. They're all here." Through the viewports, Marcus could see the growing collection of ships at the system's edge. What had started as his desperate call for help had become something much larger, a gathering of every major power in the galaxy, all of them drawn by the song that was still spreading through crystalline networks across known space. But, more importantly, he could see that resonance of deep places had reached the station. The massive being's bulk filled one of the main viewports, its compound eyes studying the humans and Kitharins with ancient intelligence. When it began to sing, the station's walls became translucent, allowing its harmonies to reach everyone aboard. The song was different this time, not the protective defiance Marcus had heard before, but something that felt like forgiveness. It's offering to negotiate, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him as the creature's intentions became clear. Resonance wants to end this peacefully. Veltar's weapon wavered. Impossible. The chorus doesn't negotiate. They simply expand and consume. Listen to it, Marcus urged. Really listen. Can't you hear what it's trying to say? For a moment, the only sound in the communication center was the complex harmony flowing from resonance of deep places. Marcus watched as Veltar's expression slowly changed from anger to confusion to something that might have been wonder. The ambassador's robes began cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before, soft pastels that seemed to shift like water in sunlight. "It's beautiful," Veltar whispered. "But how is it possible?" "Our records clearly show that the chorus rejected all attempts at communication." "Your records show what your ancestors wanted them to show." Historical keeper Felgron's voice came through the communication system. Somehow, the elderly Kithrin had made his way to the station's central command center. "I've been reviewing the original contact logs, the ones that were classified and hidden away centuries ago. The chorus tried to communicate with us for 50 years before the war began. They offered to share their knowledge, to teach us their methods of harmonious development. We ignored them because we couldn't understand their song speech, and we were too proud to admit our limitation." Felgron's image appeared on the main display, his ancient face lined with sorrow. "We convinced ourselves that their silence to our verbal attempts meant hostility, when in fact they were singing to us constantly. We simply couldn't hear them." Through the station's now translucent walls, Marcus could see other members of the chorus approaching. Each one was unique. Some resembled Resonance's serpentine form, while others were more geometric, appearing as living crystal formations that moved with fluid grace. All of them were singing, their combined voices creating harmonies of such complexity that Marcus felt his consciousness expanding again, briefly touching minds so alien yet so familiar that tears began streaming down his face. In that moment of connection, he saw what Veltar had feared, but also what the ambassador had misunderstood. The chorus didn't want to convert worlds into lifeless crystal. They wanted to transform them into something infinitely more complex and beautiful. Ecosystems where crystalline structures served as living memory banks, preserving the experiences and knowledge of every species they encountered. They weren't conquerors. They were librarians on a galactic scale. "They're offering to teach us," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything they've learned over millions of years of careful cultivation. They want to share it. But they need us to stop destroying their memory crystals first." Veltar lowered his weapon, his robes now a soft blue that Marcus recognized as wonder mixed with deep shame. "The mining operations, we've been destroying their libraries. Worse than that," Felgron's image continued. "Each crystal formation contains the preserved consciousness of their ancestors. When we mine them, we're not just destroying information, we're committing murder on a scale that's difficult to comprehend." Commander Kexith, who had been listening to reports from across the system, suddenly straightened. "Ambassador, the fleet commanders are requesting a direct communication channel. They want to speak with whoever's in charge here." "Put them through," Veltar said wearily, finally holstering his weapon. The main display split into multiple screens, each showing a different species representative. Marcus recognized Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation, no relation, despite the shared name, alongside delegates from dozens of other civilizations. All of them looked tense, confused, and more than a little awed by what they were witnessing. "This is Admiral Chun speaking for the Joint Intervention Fleet," the human officer announced. "We're receiving some very disturbing reports about genocide and war crimes in this system. We're also detecting harmonic transmissions unlike anything in our databases. Can someone explain what the hell is going on here?" Veltar stepped forward, his diplomatic training finally reasserting itself despite the extraordinary circumstances. Admiral, I'm Ambassador Veltar of the Kithrin Collective. We have made a terrible mistake. For 3,000 years, we have been at war with the indigenous species of our colony world. We believed we were fighting monsters. We now understand that we were the monsters. The admission sent ripples of shock through the assembled fleet representatives. Admiral Chen leaned forward in her command chair. Are you claiming responsibility for genocide, Ambassador? I'm claiming responsibility for the greatest crime in our species' history, Veltar replied, his robes now a deep purple of profound regret. We destroyed an advanced civilization because we couldn't understand their form of communication. We convinced ourselves that they were hostile when they were trying to welcome us. And when they defended themselves and their cultural sites, we labeled them as monsters to justify our continued aggression. The hegemony representative, a tall insectoid being, spoke up. What is the current status of this indigenous species? How many survivors remain? Before Veltar could answer, resonance of deep places sang a complex harmony that somehow reached every ship in the system simultaneously. Marcus felt the creature's meaning rather than heard it. We are few, but we endure. We mourn our lost songs, but we do not seek vengeance. We seek understanding. Incredible, breathed the Zephyrian delegate. We're receiving the transmission directly through our ship's crystal matrix. The being is communicating through our own technology. Admiral Chun was studying something off-screen. Our xenobiologists are analyzing the harmonic patterns. Preliminary results suggest this is one of the most sophisticated communication methods ever encountered. The information density is off the charts. They're conveying complex emotional and conceptual data that would take us hours to express in words. More than that, added Dr. Sarah Kim, the Federation's chief xenologist, who had joined Admiral Chun on the screen. We're detecting similar harmonic resonance from crystalline formations throughout this region of space. This species appears to have created a communication network spanning hundreds of light years. Marcus stepped into view of the communication array. Admiral Chun, this is Captain Marcus Chun, the human the Kithrins originally hired to kill the creature. What we're seeing here is the remnant of a civilization that achieved something unprecedented, perfect harmony between technology and nature, individual consciousness, and collective knowledge. They've turned entire worlds into living libraries that can preserve information for millions of years. And the Kithrins have been destroying these libraries for 3 millennia. Admiral Chun concluded grimly. What's the estimated cultural loss? Felgron answered from his position in the command center. According to our own records, we have mined approximately 12 million crystalline formations since establishing our colony. If Captain Chun is correct about their nature as information storage, we have destroyed the equivalent of, he paused to calculate, roughly 2 billion years of accumulated knowledge and experience. The silence that followed this admission was profound. Marcus could see the representatives of various civilizations exchanging glances, their expressions ranging from horror to disbelief. This wasn't just genocide. It was the destruction of one of the galaxy's oldest and most advanced cultures. The Neutral Worlds Coalition representative, an elderly humanoid with silver skin, finally spoke. What is the chorus of stone seeking now? Reparations? Justice? Territorial sovereignty? Resonance of deep places sang again, and this time Marcus felt confident enough to translate. They want to share what they've learned. They're offering to teach anyone willing to listen how to develop technology that works in harmony with natural systems rather than destroying them. They want to help us become better than we are. In exchange for what? Asked the hegemony representative suspiciously. Nothing, Marcus replied, still awed by the creature's generosity. They're offering this freely. The only thing they ask is that we stop destroying the remaining memory crystals and allow them to relocate the damaged ones to safer locations. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment, clearly consulting with advisors off-screen. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of momentous decision. Captain Chun, Are you willing to serve as an intermediary in these negotiations? Your species has a reputation for bridging cultural gaps, and you seem to have established communication with this chorus. Marcus looked out at Resonance of Deep Places, whose massive form was still visible through the transparent station walls. The creature's compound eyes met his, and he felt a warm harmonic pulse that he interpreted as encouragement. "Yes, Admiral. I'll do whatever I can to help." "Then, let's begin," Admiral Chin said. "But first, Ambassador Veltar, I need your formal surrender of all Kithran claims to Kithra Prime. This world will be placed under galactic protection while we work out the details of the new arrangement." Veltar nodded slowly. "You have it. The Kithran Collective formally renounces all territorial claims to Kithra Prime and acknowledges the Chorus of Stone as the planet's rightful inhabitants." As legal formalities were exchanged and the first steps toward an unprecedented interspecies alliance were taken, Marcus found himself thinking about how different this day had turned out from what he'd expected. He'd come to this system as a simple cargo hauler looking for enough credits to keep his ship running. He was leaving as the first human to establish formal communication with one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. 6 months later, the changes were visible throughout human space. Ships powered by harmonic crystal matrices that worked in partnership with their artificial components rather than simply exploiting them. Space stations that grew rather than being built, their living crystal frameworks expanding and adapting to their inhabitants' needs while preserving the memories and experiences of everyone who lived within them. Marcus stood on the bridge of his rebuilt ship. The Meridian's edge had been transformed by Chorus technology into something that was part vessel, part living organism, and entirely miraculous. Through its translucent hull, he could see the crystal gardens of New Harmony, the first joint human Chorus colony world. "Incoming message from the Kithran refugee fleet," Yuki announced from her station. The Kithrans had voluntarily exiled themselves from their orbital cities, choosing to wander space while they contemplated the magnitude of their historical crimes. Many of them, led by Ambassador Veltar, had requested the opportunity to study with the Chorus and learn the harmonious development methods their ancestors had rejected. "Put it through," Marcus said. Veltar's image appeared on the main screen. The former ambassador looked different now. His robes were simpler, and his 4 eyes held a peace that Marcus had never seen during their first encounters. "Captain Shun, I wanted to thank you again for what you did in the Kithra system." "You don't need to keep thanking me, Veltar. You're the one who chose to accept the truth when it was offered. Perhaps. But you were the one who chose friendship over fear when faced with something you didn't understand. That choice changed everything." As the communication ended, Marcus reflected on the truth of those words. The galaxy was indeed changing. Species that had never cooperated before were working together on harmonic development projects. Ancient conflicts were being resolved through song-speech mediation. And humanity, despite being one of the youngest spacefaring civilizations, had found itself at the center of a new era of cooperation and understanding. All because one stubborn cargo hauler had refused to kill something beautiful, choosing instead to listen to its song. The universe, Marcus had learned, was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. And sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply be willing to hear its music.